So yeah, I know that we all know that there's one huge topic. Well, sort of like
Main topic,
approach we
yes.
wanted to take today, at least.
Yeah. Let me see. Let me just get this thing full screen. And
Yeah, let me pull it up too, so I can have it in front of me.
Yeah. So basically, what the basic question that kind of we said that kind of boils down to, like, how do you write something you've never experienced? Basically, that's kind of what it really boils down to.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like
it was like, I don't
run down
know,
the list,
like,
but
well, I guess to preface this first, we kind of have to give the context of where we
yeah.
actually got this. There was, of course, you posted, and somebody gave us a response. Asked us quite a few questions. Some questions that I will put just for reference. How to write torture scenes without being edgy. How to write about siblings when you have none. How to write about religious beliefs when you are an atheist. How to describe how a concussion feels like when you were never hit in the head. So you kind of get the gist of questions that we were being asked by this individual. With there's an added caveat though, where they decided to add, I don't need these questions answered, but 99% of authors do, and discuss these for them because 99% of the time they just embarrass themselves when tackling these issues. Of course, chances are thick you don't know either. Most of these questions can't be answered just doing research on Wikipedia.
Which I mean,
oh man, I am trying real hard right now. I am trying to keep myself on a level head.
I mean, on paper he's not wrong, but I mean,
certainly not.
But like essentially, all the questions. I mean, I guess there's some of them which we can kind of differentiate a bit, but what it kind of, I think the best way you can start this off is, it's like, how do you write about something you've not experienced? Like, that's basically like when you get down to the gist of it.
Yeah,
because like there is a certain degree of potency and honesty you can get when you directly experience something that you're writing about, whether or not you have personally experienced war on the front lines, you've experienced the death of a loved one, or in this case, how do you write about gender dysphoria when you're cis? I mean, there's a genuine point to be made for all of the above here. There really is. But you see, the way how I see things is that this kind of turns into a question of who has the business to approach a certain theme when you may not necessarily be a part of the affected group. And I feel that's a fair question to ask, but the problem is we kind of run into a bit of a pitfall where it's like, at this point, we may end up limiting who has the right to portray something versus who does. And don't get me wrong, when it comes to the subject of gender dysphoria, how do you display a character's sexuality, among other things, it can vary for somebody who is quote-unquote cis or who is straight, who's gay, whoever. Like, all of that does play a factor into it. However, at the same time, though, it's not as though you can't get some notion of how this works. Like, I've been friends with people in the trans community, people in the gay community. Like, I've been friends with more of them ever since I moved to this country, because Lord knows where I'm from. you can't even live openly down where I'm from.
Yeah,
because where I'm from, you're kind of taught to have a certain perception of people who are outside, who are quote unquote outside the norm. You're taught to have that certain perspective, and it's because of those perspectives why you might wind up having some portrayals that are just like, they boil down to caricatures, or they just flat out disrespect the people they're meant to represent. This is why it's important for you to at least reach out to these to the kind of people that you wanted to portray within your work. Like, if you want to portray gender dysphoria, the best way to go about it, if you don't have it yourself, it really is to come to understand the perspective of those who actually have it. So this doesn't. So, like the person says, it doesn't require you to look at Wikipedia, because God knows, like how they've mentioned it, it's not the wisest thing to do.
Yeah, well, they're definitely not.
It gives you a general idea, but it's
Nah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
It gives you a general idea, but not necessarily the personal idea. Like,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Like, the chronicled idea on paper is one thing, but the personal experience is another. And nowadays, it's a hell of a lot easier for you to get an idea of what this is like for people. There's several blogs on, I know people don't like this word. There's several blogs on Tumblr. There's several blogs on Twitter. Hell, there are YouTubers who talk about their dysphoria. It feels as though that they're trapped in a body that doesn't feel like it's theirs, or rather, they just don't feel comfortable in their own skin.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most of us might not have an idea of what that's like, because a lot of folks, it comes down to, I don't like how I look, I don't like what my body looks like, but that alone isn't really enough to describe gender dysphoria, as far as I am aware of it, as far as I have heard. It more feels like you're kind of in a contradictory state. You know who you are, but your body doesn't really reflect that. It doesn't really, and not only that, it also turns into a bit of a societal thing too. So, just to kind of sum it all up, it's not necessarily just a physical. It comes down to a psychological and a societal angle too. If you understand all of those angles based on the people that you talk to, and coming to terms with how society revolves around you as a quote-unquote cis person, if you can come to terms with that and understand it, I feel you can portray it as decently or as bestly as you possibly can at that point. It might not be as potent as someone who's actually gone through it, but you're close enough. Now I wouldn't say that makes it cheaper in comparison, not necessarily, because the way I see it, sometimes voices and perspectives need to be elevated by those sometimes outside of the in-group. That's just how this usually works.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's how it's always worked throughout history. People have always had to speak on the behalf of others, just because that's the only way to get your voice to expand. What I did want to add is I agree with the idea that it's really important that you sort of, if you don't have these experiences, you need to figure out ways to, I guess, quote unquote, live through this other person's experience to be able to understand it. And I think you shouldn't go in expecting that because this person has this experience that it's going to be the same way. Of course, exactly. In a group will often have similar shared experiences because that's what them in the group, but within the group there's variations to what they're doing. You're going to have to speak to multiple people, you're going to get multiple different angles, and you're going to have to realize that you may portray it accurately to one person's experience and maybe not another's, but that's okay.
It's kind of like what I call the chocolate rain philosophy. Some stay dry, others feel the pain. Like, there can be a shared experience throughout a group, but not everyone experiences the same degree of prejudice or privilege the same way. Like, for example, the song "Chocolate Rain" is basically a it's basically a, what's the word for it now? How do I describe it? It's okay. Basically, what it's all about the subject of racism and how it affects blacks in certain areas or in certain places. Hence, some stay dry and others feel the pain. Like, some people can relate to some forms of poor treatment, societal oppression, or in the case of gender dysphoria, like, some people have a better shot at getting help for it than others. So, on the one hand, you might find some who come to terms with it, with what they're able to do, while others, they don't have the same luck. So it's like, you're going to find a lot of agreeing opinions here and there. But you're also going to have to take the outliers into consideration too, because no group of people are monoliths.
Exactly.
Also, I think obviously when you trying to write something you don't like, you have not experienced before, I think another good thing to do is how do you put it? Obviously, approach. I think what I'm trying to say is, like, the approach of how you go about it. I think sometimes it's better, instead of focusing on the difference between you and that person, try to start with the similarities. So I think, I don't know. Exactly. I feel some people kind of like,
I didn't even think of that.
They get too focused on the difference. But if you start from, hey, what we got cinema, like, hey, you're very dumb, stupid beginning 101. We're human. we both bleed red.
Right.
You know, it sounds dumb, but like if you start from there, you can start thinking, okay, and also, well, people and humans stuff. There's only certain spectrum of emotions we feel. There is like anger, hate. There's anger, love, and that stuff. There's not like 20 other gazillion other emotions beyond like the the standard ones we experience. And then obviously then from there, I feel it just helps you be a little more open-minded or clear to the differences, or more susceptible to them, because now that you've kind of got yourself comfortable with what you have in common, you can now quickly just catch out what they have different, and then maybe hopefully connect that to you in an empathetic way. So that therefore
exactly.
when you go to write now, you can write it as best as you can from their experience in your language. So when
exactly,
yeah,
I didn't think of that.
Because and that's very true. Because like everyone's experience may not be the same, and it varies depending on where you are and what your background is. But at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we connect to each other emotionally faster than anything else. I mean, logic is one thing. Like logic is kind of the fabric for everything, but emotion is basically where the point of contact starts, if you ask me.
Yeah.
If it all really just goes back to empathy. I mean, regardless of what your orientation is or wherever your background is, if you're able to establish some point of connection between you and the people or individual that you're trying to write about, chances are it's going to resonate with someone. You're aware that you're aware of your differences in your background, but you don't necessarily don't think of each other as any less human.
Yeah.
Like I was reading the third book for The Expanse the other day, Abaddon's Gate. There's a part in it that really, really hit me. There's a sequence where there's a ship full of Mormons and Christians, and they were heading over to this weird artifact thing. It's a long story, but in a nutshell, they were calling the Martians the Dusters, and there was one character who just got appalled by it by yelling out, "Can we please not do that in here? Do you know why we fling the term duster in here? It's because we are trying to dehumanize the people that we don't agree with and we don't like. That's what forces us to see them less than what we are." And like I had that perspective going in, but I just love the fact that one character is the one who brought it up out of everyone else, because this woman shares the same religion as most of those that are in the room, and no one even batted an eye when the term duster was flung around. But she's the only person to flat out call it out, and it makes sense. Like again, we're all different. We come from somewhere, but at the end of the day, we still have the human experience, and you'll find that the human experience crosses over into many of the differences that we have, but they don't necessarily make us any less human.
Yeah, like that's how I always when Nate brought it up, I was kind of thinking in my head and listening to you, and when you brought up the human experience, I was like, that's sort of how I am able to relate to people and how they may act in certain situations. Like sometimes I just listen to people and I'm like, I can relate to that emotion. I can relate to acting or feeling this way in this scenario, even if I wouldn't do that because I'm not you and I don't act like you. I have my own. I can relate to so many characters and why they would do things. Like there are times where I'll communicate with other readers or writers, and they'll be like, "It doesn't make sense that they would do this," and I'll be like, "Oh, it makes a lot of sense. Does it make sense in your eyes that you would do it, but you're not that person?"
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
you have to come from the idea that we, as Nate said, we share the same emotions. You just have to understand where and what triggers those emotions and how they express it. But we're all going to have those things lying within us in some way, shape, or form. And once you understand that, you can sort of figure out, okay, if I poke this person here, what's going to come out? Okay, this is going to come out.
Yeah.
Now I sort of understand what makes this person tick, what's going on in their head, how are they feeling, etc., etc.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think actually it's kind of, I have another one. It's kind of along the lines of what you just said, Kite, about the dusters. It's more a real life one, which has made me think about is, I think in when they do the, it's a bit heavy topic. We'll touch on it real quickly though. But like when they do abortions, they don't call the baby. They don't call it baby. They call it. I'm not sure what they call it, but they give it another name. But it's for the exact same reason, to dehumanize the thing they're doing. And yeah,
because like I know how I feel about the subject of abortion. Because like the thing is, I can't be in the shoes of the mother all the way to really condemn her decision or really encourage it. Because the way I see it, it doesn't really affect me personally. Because the thing is, I'm a man. I've got no business debating the agency of a woman when it comes to her body. But I can see why the pro-life crowd does turn their nose up a little bit when it comes to like, it's a baby, no, it's a fetus. Like I can see that. I can see why some people will get angry at it, because it's like, oh, the baby isn't even 100% formed yet, so it's not even the way how I see it. I don't even think about it like that. Like I don't approach it like that. I more see it like this is a decision that the mother has to make, and it's not the decision that I would like them to follow through it, but it's not something for me to intervene with, especially when it's like, are they able, can they raise the baby? What are their circumstances like what's happening? What was the circumstances of the birth? Like there's like 50,000 questions going off all at once, and there's no single answer for any single one of them. And I mean, some of this is coming from personal experience too, if you can believe it, because I knew someone who had to go through it, and it was not easy for her. Like a lot of our calls just boiled down to, I really don't know what I'm going to do here. I don't want to, but I just don't know how I'm going to raise this child. Like the father just has no interest in helping me. Like up to that point, whenever abortion came up, it was basically, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it. But in that situation, it was literally, it has nothing to do with whether or not I like it or I approve. The decision really comes down to the person in question here. And if you know for a fact that they're breaking over it, especially when it's possible for someone to break over a period, because again, they say a father doesn't become a father until he sees his child, but a mother becomes a mother the moment the moment the baby starts to develop in her. So there's that maternal instinct. Of course, some might feel it more than others depending on who you ask, but at the end of the day,
it's usually there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to give humans or people around me the benefit of the doubt that we're kind enough and we have some semblance of a connection to what we have, to what's developing in us. Well, at least, the mother to the child anyway.
Yeah, so most people, I guess I would say, I would agree. I mean, you know, there are a lot of humans on the earth, so I think we're doing okay on that end. It's just, it's just, sometimes not you, like oddities happen. But I think we're doing okay in the grand scheme of things and that. I didn't want to turn it too much into talk of pregnancy, so maybe
it was a good segue though.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I would definitely like to probably talk about some maybe at another point, definitely. But
one thing that I really wanted to like talk about in relation to the same post is sort of like a lot of the gatekeeping, arrogance sort of attitude that I can see in reading and writing a lot.
Right.
And I kind of want to go off my own personal experience first, because I'm transparent and I'm not going to act like I'm infallible. So when I got into reading and writing you guys were pretty much there when I first kind of started. And like as I improved, I mean, we all know about the Dunning-Kruger curve and all that stuff. You know, I was a victim to it. I started to improve, and I started to I didn't ever do this with other writers because I would never want to, hurt their confidence or anything. But I did do this with other works where I would sometimes say, oh, this work isn't that good because it's missing this, and this. And this work is much better than this because it has this and that. And as I got better, as I became a better writer, not from the sense that I can put better words, but like understanding sort of the craft, I started to be like, I had a lot more tolerance, and that tolerance sort of turned into understanding, and understanding that, I may have a good understanding of writing, but that doesn't mean I have a good understanding of what other writers are trying to to do.
Yeah.
And so like I needed to stop putting myself in this place of thinking I have the right ideas of how to write and start communicating with people in a way where I can say, you know, this story.
You kind of approach it. You kind of try to approach it on their playing field and trying to see
Yeah,
what they're trying to
yeah.
go for, sort of thing.
Because
to
I've seen
understand
it.
the story on their terms.
Yeah, I've seen it, especially on Wattpad. It's so annoying. I would read through people's works, and they'll be like, "Oh, you shouldn't put this here because it makes this character unlikable." I'm like, okay, what if that's what they wanted to do? Like, who are you? Like, why are you putting yourself so high that you can just make judgment calls on their work?
Yeah.
It makes people so scared to write.
Yeah.
Because they're so focused on people always telling them. It's like this people get gatekept. They get gatekept into like, oh, there's only right decisions I can make, but I don't know all the right decisions. Well, I mean, you'll never know all the right decisions because people are going to tell you
it's impossible.
Yeah, because everyone's saying, dude, you do this, you're messing up your work. You do that, you're messing up your work. You're doing that, you're not doing it right. And it's just like, well, what am I supposed to do? You know what I mean?
I feel like there is a point to be made for when certain plot elements may not work out the way they need to.
Yeah.
And there are some cases where somebody does need to get pulled in, but here's the problem with here's the flip side though. You see, I'm gonna direct quote the question here. Don't give this person any crud, please. I'm begging you. So basically, I don't need these questions answered, but 99% of the authors do, and discuss these for them because 99% of the time they just embarrass themselves when tackling these issues. So, here's the thing about this. We can't really go about this from the position of, oh, they're just going to embarrass themselves. No, this is a matter of how can we help these people get to the point where they don't have to worry about quote-unquote embarrassing themselves. Because I already guarantee you that most of these people that we're talking about in this conversation already have the fear of God put into them when they see comments like these. They already have the fear of God put into them when they see this kind of message. Because like, back when I was on Wattpad, just to get a little personal myself, and I'm going to relate this to what you mentioned, Will. A guy jumped into my comment section and mentioned that my lead character was very unlikable because he quote unquote comes across as very selfish. Now, I'm not gonna talk about the scene in particular because like that's going to come across as me trying to play defense for what I was writing at the time, and I don't want to play it. I don't want to play it too hard because it's not about my personal pride at this point. It's more like what that attitude was telling me. It's like so. You're kind of implying that the character's selfishness is an inherent problem with the storytelling. When, honestly speaking, a character being fundamentally selfish doesn't hurt anything. It doesn't. It is only a matter...
that I find just absolutely hilarious is that it's almost acting as if there aren't fundamentally selfish people.
Exactly.
That
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then on top of that, that's like a direct contradiction to my own ideology, where everything people do is in some way or another selfish.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Exactly.
Like, in some,
because like,
yeah, go. I need to talk.
Oh no, no, you go on. I want to hear this.
Oh no, I wasn't too much. I was just gonna add on to your point. It's just like like people, like I feel like a lot of
psychological
people.
Egoism is a philosophy that myself and a lot of other people hold, and so as a result of that, there are a lot of people who also enact upon those ideologies of do however you please instead of do however society expects of you.
Right, because like I will admit my character, even more so nowadays, the way how I have written them since then, yes, they are selfish. They can be. But now here's the question. What exactly makes them selfish? What exactly makes them selfish in your perception? Because like in some cases, the character in question is motivated by their family, right? They're motivated by the want to protect their family. But due to that, they will make decisions that may end up hurting other people. So in a sense, you could argue that in some sense, they're sacrificing everything for their family. But at the same time, what they're doing is fundamentally going to screw over other people. Yeah. So we have a case of they are selfish, but they're also sacrificing a lot of their own selves and their own sanity all for the sake of a family.
Yeah. Yeah, and I find
a middle ground situation.
I got it. Yeah, I find like most like reasonable or like justifiable explanations for people's motivations are based on a mix of selfish and selfishness. Like when you really boil down everything you do something because it helps yourself and it'll probably help the other people. There's nothing. I don't think there's nothing you truly do which can just be truly selfless.
Exactly.
On some angle, it's coming back down to you, isn't it? Down to your motivation to do the sheer fact that you have motivation to do the thing means it's something you want to do for yourself.
Right.
You really get down to it. But yeah, I don't know.
And fundamentally speaking, it's like they say, like most of the questions that we are talking about here, the questions that were listed here, and what we're talking about, it's true. None of these can really be answered by just doing research on Wikipedia. But the thing is, most of these questions you can't really ask them on Wikipedia to begin with. That's not how any of that works. Like the human experience isn't something simple as you being able to quote unquote research it. It really is something that you have to come to terms with yourself as a person, and you need to come to terms with somebody else's understanding on top of that. It may you may not agree with it.
Yeah.
Hell, you might find it reprehensible, but it's all a part of the same thing.
Yeah.
And now there are some writers out there who are so far up in the clouds in their own way that they're not even considering this side of the conversation, and that's true. But I don't think we ought to approach them like, "Oh my God, what the heck are you doing? You're gonna make a complete dummy of yourself on the world stage, bro." I mean, look, I'm an advocate for tough love for when it counts, but I don't want to put the fear of God in someone before they can get their own version of Song of Ice and Fire published one day. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I think that stuff kind of especially affects people who are like new to like the writing scene or something like that, and they're just kind of like they don't know what's like. They have an idea, they're really motivated, but at the same time they just want to figure out the rules. And I think most of the time, through general education or most stuff you probably go through, if you haven't really had like a lot of experience to do something really artistic, where you'll kind of have to learn to like use your own like your own thoughts, your autonomy to kind of figure out your ultimate decision what you're gonna do. You can fall into the trap of some of these people who say, "No, don't do this, do that, don't do that, do this," and then you're just left trying to please one person, not yourself, and it's not gonna come up honestly in your writing, and then no one's gonna like it, and it's just like for me that's only when I hear stuff like that. I'm just worried for people who just like really new to it and just don't really they are looking for guidance, and then unfortunately come across someone who's like that. So,
what you just said there about not trying to appease any people is why Ernest Hemingway actually recommended to not talk about your work when you're writing it.
Yeah, and I practice that philosophy pretty much daily. Like, I do make art for my characters on a regular basis, but whenever anyone wants an obligatory lore dump from me, I rarely, if ever, do it personally. Because my thing is, if someone really wants to know, they will ask you themselves. They will want to know what's going on within your work if they ask you themselves.
Yeah.
It's like one of the worst things about walking into any writing community nowadays, which I mean, Will talked about this too the other day.
Yeah.
It's when you go in and you always get bombarded with these list of don'ts. Don't do this. Don't do that. No, you can't do this. You can't do that. Like, I cannot tell you how frustrating that crap is. I cannot
The thing about writing is that you can do anything. It's a matter of getting the execution right to where it's not jarring.
Exactly.
Which is a difficult process, but rest assured, it can be done.
You'll figure it out. You just gotta keep going at it, and you'll figure it out.
Exactly. It's why the terms "don't" and "do," that binary just doesn't jive with me.
Yeah.
I mean, look. We all want to make sure that certain portrayals are done properly. We want to make sure that our drama is communicated in a manner in which it's compelling. We want to do that. But the fact of the matter is, every single writer out there kind of has their own unique way of proposing that drama and putting it down. That's not to say I'm doing the whole quote unquote special snowflake thing. But the thing is, the way how emotions are explored in, let's say, a book like Dune versus a book like The Expanse, you're going to notice a massive difference in the writing styles alone and how emotions and feelings are communicated within both stories.
Exactly.
Like there's no one size fits all, because if that were the case, every single book that that we have within the U.S. right now would not have changed for the Scarlet Letter. I guarantee you that.
Yeah, and not even that. Just like it's not just how everyone writes and their perception of stuff is different. How we take in information and what we get out of it is different as well. Our life, you can have two people who have the same experience and come out of it totally different. So, like when you put all them factors into account, it's just trying to put that into a binary yes or no answer. Most times doesn't really work.
And you get people confused because then they start doing things that isn't jiving with how they see the world, and it's like, okay, well, what do I do? Like, people start writing and they're like, okay, I don't know what to say. I'm like, of course you don't know what to say. You don't think like that.
Yeah.
Like one of the things I often had to put up with was always being told, you can't be writing your book as though it's some sort of video game or some sort of some sort of anime or whatever. And I can see some merit to that claim. I can, because anime is a visual medium and novels are a written medium. They're two different things. But at the same time, though, that's not to say that you can't borrow some of the aspects of the writing, not the visual style. And even then, anime is a medium for writing to begin with.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like the advice that I got on that front was kind of moot, because it felt like the person was coming at me from like an ideological standpoint rather than an actual case of reading what I was doing. It's like, yeah, I know I was leaning into some gaming tropes at the time. I will admit that much, but. Though they were more like window dressing for what was really happening on the page.
Yeah.
Gosh. Okay. So I know we've brought up tabletop RPGs on this podcast before, but like,
basically.
The most frustrating thing that I've seen throughout my time playing it is when the DM who just openly admits, "Yeah, I took this idea from Critical Role." Like, you could at least have the illusion that it's your own idea, but you're openly admitting to essentially plagiarism.
Right.
And saying, I didn't come up with this idea myself. And I frankly despise that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because, like, you can take inspiration and you can take cues from something, but the thing is that you don't need to flat out mention it. You can spin it any way you like. Or hell, here's the funny thing. I was talking to my teacher the other day, and something very weird happened while we were chatting about Dune. Like, I told her I was reading Dune, right? And she's telling me, okay, which book are you on? Like, she was really invested in the conversation. I told her I was reading the first one. She says, all right, when you get to God Emperor, we have a lot to talk about. So I chewed through the books until I got to God Emperor, and I finally understood why she wanted me to read it. I'm not putting myself up on any pedestals here, all right? I am nowhere near the level of Frank Herbert, right? I'm nowhere near that. I never will be either. Frank Herbert is in a realm of his own. But what I started to notice was a lot of the ideas that Frank Herbert had within Dune, I had been playing with those ideas long before I even touched the book. And it actually gave me pause for a minute. Because when I actually read Dune, I was like, dude, if I had actually read this book before I started writing, there's a good chance that I would not have the book that I have right. There's a good chance that I wouldn't have. Because some of the ideas are scarily close. But my teacher told me that it's nothing to be ashamed of, because the fact of the matter is, it's not even just the fact that Dune is one of the most influential sci-fi books of all time, and that it's influenced like pretty much nearly everything we've seen from Star Wars to even Billy and Mandy, of all things. It's more like you should take solace in the fact that there are books out there that have played with some of the same ideas you've played with, and they've managed to get as far as they have. It's nothing to feel ashamed of if there's something within another story that parallels yours. If anything else, that should empower you. That should literally empower you as a writer. 100%.
I'm going to kind of explain why it would empower me, because like, if I were to come across something that I realized somebody else had also done without me knowing prior, that would be really empowering, because that means that somebody who is more accomplished than I am thought of the same thing I did.
And push that idea out there to that point. It kind of shows that the path you're on, although it may not exactly the same as theirs, is not totally alien. You know what I mean? I think that just it's just I think that's just awesome. Whenever I find something that's kind of touched upon some ideas, I'm like, yeah, it's great. It means I'm not like totally off in the dark, which is it could be fine. Exactly. It means you're confident, but it's like, yeah, I'm there's a path here.
It definitely means the path before you has been treaded before. And it's not inherently a bad thing if you're walking a path that's already been treaded before.
Yeah.
If nothing else, that gives you a better shot and a better way to understand the themes that you are also working on. Like, you might have an understanding of the themes within your own perspective, but how the author portrays the same themes you're working on, it can really expand your understanding of the same ideas. Hell, in fact, let me blow your mind for a minute. So, in Dune, there's this thing called the spice, right? In Star Wars, they have the same thing, right? They also have spice in their world. The God Emperor. The God Emperor is also a worm with a human-like face. There's someone in Star Wars who's very similar to that. Jabba the Hutt.
Jabba the Hutt, yeah.
Exactly. Like, the thing is, Frank Herbert knew all about these things, but he never sued George Lucas because he said he was too nice to sue George Lucas for that. But honestly speaking, I'm happy he didn't, because I will always see Dune as a superior product in more ways than one. But I'm happy Star Wars exists in spite of everything else, because it's like, the path has been treaded before.
Yeah.
And if somebody else can take the path in another direction and do something else with it, then
that's awesome.
Where do you?
It's just more. Really... Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Oh no! You're fine. You're fine.
Yeah. No, I just say it's just more of the stuff which you'll probably like, because more up your alley, and then it just helps you expand or reflect on some of the ideas you had, and then maybe you've seen that thing. You was already going that path, and you see this swing other things like, oh, now maybe I can take this, like evolve it a bit like this, and kind of take it this way. And it's just great. It's great stuff. You know what I mean?
Even Final Fantasy VII has some aspects of Dune in it, if you can believe it. Even Final Fantasy VII has it. And the game Xenogears from the 90s. Do you know how much that borrows from Jungian psychology, philosophy, Freud, Karen Horney, like? All of these aspects, all of these paths have been walked and treaded out.
Yeah.
Now it's just a matter of us borrowing from them and then just riding with them as far as we can.
Yeah, and it's just, I think what really makes the difference is just how we portray that idea for ourselves. Like, obviously we have the idea or a concept or something, and it's just how we portray it that makes the big difference. Like, a lot of the great stories all out there are ideas inspired from older myths and stuff. Like, if you read the book Hero of a Thousand Faces, like, I think George Lucas went through that book whilst he was doing Star Wars, and it's just literally just monomyths. They talk about all the myths from like many years ago and how they all kind of like, although they were done or told like from different times and different places where these people never met, there's this through line of themes and things that happen in these stories that are very similar. So and it's.
I mean, hell, we have historical fiction that in itself is literally taking from stuff that's, literally been done before in our history and just retelling it in creative and innovative ways.
Right.
So,
yeah, it's why I've just never jived with the whole don't do this, don't do that. Like, I just can't jive with that philosophy, because if we for a minute bought into the do's and don'ts all the way, I doubt half the stories I doubt half the writers that we're talking about right now would have even been inspired to pick up their pen. Like, with Frank Herbert picking up his pen in response to people's blind support of messianic figures, or George Lucas wanting to tell a story about rebellion, rising up against corrupt empires, like taking some cues from the Viet Cong against colonization. Like, all of this stuff comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
All of it comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's, of course, going back to Ernest Hemingway, just most of his novels are based on wars that he had experience with, like the Spanish Civil War, the First World War. Just a lot of times authors draw from experience, and due to the fact that sometimes real-world experience can be controversial, most people would be too scared to even jot down their first idea because of that.
Right, because there's always going to be someone with another perspective that's just not going to line up. But honestly, that's just that again is a part of the human experience, the ability to hold a different opinion from your fellow man.
Yeah.
Of course, sometimes that other opinion
can be dangerous.
Yeah, like I believe it becomes dangerous when someone angles that opinion into direct action. Like that's when I start to get scared.
Yeah, call to action is sort of where you have to sort of sit back and say, okay, or what are you trying to tell me here?
Yeah,
exactly.
I've actually seen this before. I want to talk about this really quick. I've seen this before where I've seen some people talk to me about portraying negative things in a story as if it's okay. And when I saw this, I was like, I don't think that's a problem. Because I think they were talking mostly. This was about Harry Potter, the treatment of like Muggles and treatment of what race is Dobby?
The guy, the slave.
I forget,
Dobby,
sort of like that. And they were saying that, like they were speaking on that, and they were kind of saying that it was sort of a direct sort of. It was they were speaking directly on the author's ideals, and I was like, oh, all right, let's slow down a bit. Let's slow down a bit because you don't necessarily know that. I think that it's okay because we have terrible things going on in our world, and them having terrible things going on in their world and it seeming okay in that world is okay. We have terrible things going on where people think it's okay every single day.
Yeah.
And even if the narrator thinks it's okay, it's okay. I think you shouldn't baby your readers into thinking, okay, I need to be told this is a bad thing. They can see for themselves and be like, okay, I don't jive with this idea.
Yeah.
And leave it at that.
Yeah. I think because I think you gotta remember, people who think this, you gotta remember, like, stories. They are stories. They are there to tell a narrative, there to make you think. They're not lectures. If you want a lecture, go to, I don't know, whatever lecture you fancy. But a story is meant to. It's like, no matter how fanciful or how out there it gets, a good story is meant to like tell the truth or keep consistent with whatever thing it's got going on. And just because there are things in there which you don't agree with, it doesn't mean that the author's saying, "Oh, I agree with this too." They're whatever world they got portrayed. They're just trying to tell. A good author is just trying to tell the truth of how it is in that world. And a really good writer would then also use that to help bring perspective or to bring out some themes or some or whatnot. But it doesn't mean just because a writer has X, Y, and Z in there that they're pro this or trying to say that. You gotta look deeper than that. You can't just look at two things. Oh yeah, that's it. Because I have this in here, it's that. You know what I mean?
Because like a lot of lessons within stories are meant to be portrayed by the narrative as well as your character's action.
Yeah.
And I feel things only become a lecture only when there's like no degree of what's the word? No degree of subtlety. Like when you start to feel that the narrator's voice starts to service a story less and more seems to kind of like be an outlet for the author to expound their views. That's when things can get a little bit rocky. But inherently, I don't think that's a bad thing either. It just depends on how we go about it. Like Dune, for example, like I'm really banging on about this book. It's really freaking amazing. It really is. Like Frank Herbert's opinion on leaders is humanity shouldn't be so quick to throw themselves at them, to allow someone to always determine where our course is, because we are literally putting our trust in someone who's just as flawed as we are.
Yeah.
We are literally putting all of our responsibilities and wants on their shoulders when they may not exactly have our best interest at heart. And because of that, when they start to curtail us over to a ruinous path, there's nothing we can do about it because we've already put all of our trust and hope into them.
You have a lot
that's
them. Yeah.
And that's dangerous. Hell, in God Emperor Dune, without even spoiling it, the main character has basically become a messianic figure only by his own actions, but because of the fact that he is pretty much destined to be this way based on a prophecy written by some unseen entities. Because of that, everyone has kind of curtailed to his will. But the character is also doing this on purpose because he has seen a path where humanity has declined, and he takes it upon himself to save humanity from that decline. But now you got to ask yourself, at what cost? And are we really better off putting all of our chips on this one person who claims to know where we're headed?
Yeah,
that's dangerous. Like,
yeah,
this is why I have the opinion I do when it comes to people and their ridiculous obsessions of certain presidents of the United States, who I will not mention by name. The way how I see it, it doesn't matter whether or not I agree with a leader or not. I'm not dumb enough to put my entire faith and identity on them. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's why I feel Dune is as powerful as it is. It's because it manages to portray that lesson without it ever feeling like a lecture. Yeah. You see what that lesson means through the character's experience, and just how twisted the whole thing gets here and there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're not told it. You're seeing. You're literally kind of seeing it unfold before you.
Yeah, it's an experience.
And from whatever perspective you're seeing it, maybe you're seeing it from a sympathetic perspective of the person doing the thing they're trying to tell you not to do, and you're kind of seeing the steps of how they reach that, and you're obviously like, oh, they did that, but oh, this is kind of turning a bit crappy. Oh gosh, that's a good way of expressing the theme without coming off like you're trying to make a lecture.
If I could use another example, The Expanse, to bring it back to that, the main character James Holden has a very particular philosophy where he feels like freedom of information is a fundamental human right. And to be fair, I don't disagree with him, but you see, he kind of takes it to the extreme. In the first book, his ship gets destroyed by Mars, or he assumes Mars was responsible. So he goes on this big galaxy-wide podcast sort of deal and basically announces that before we have the full story of what happened, of what have actually happened. So basically, a good chunk of the belt, who are independent from Earth and Mars, believe that this is a strike against them, whereas Earth and Mars have no idea what the hell is going on. Because of this, tensions are at an all-time high. So in a sense, yes, people have a right to know what's going on.
Yeah.
But here's the problem. This means that everyone has a version of the story that's not 100% the truth.
Yeah.
At least not at the moment. So because of this, people are taking actions into their own hands, which is only going to make it a hell of a lot more complicated for the people who can do something to do anything, because the people already see the situation as one thing. Like freedom of knowledge, yeah, I'm for that. But the trouble is,
not everyone has the right knowledge to give.
Yeah. Not everyone is going to take the same information you're dishing out the same way. Some people might take it as, well, I want to find out more. Others, if they have a certain leaning, are going to be like, all right, man, we got to do something right now. Come on, pack your things, pick up your arms. We got to do something right now, boys.
Yeah, true. Yeah, cool. I guess we've covered that for the most part. Should we do? I'm not sure how long we've gone. I have to check how long we've gone through on the thing in the end.
I think we've run at about 40-ish minutes. I know we started a little bit later than normal.
It feels about that long, definitely.
That one post provided us a lot of content, so I thank you.
Yeah, it was really good. It was overall good. It was a good question overall. Do you want to do another question? To be honest, I haven't really looked at these too hard since.
Let's see. I have been looking at these here for a while, and how to write torture scenes without being edgy. And the top question up there, those really appealed to me because I actually wrote a torture scene not too long ago. Okay. So the way how I see torture scene, fundamentally speaking, depending on what your definition of the word edgy is, a torture scene is always going to come across as edgy to you, because you are likely describing everything in excruciating detail.
Yeah.
But the thing, the way how I approach torture scenes, it's less about the physical pain and more like the psychological trauma, because torture itself isn't necessarily pain. It's also time. It's how you lose your semblance while these acts are going on. Like while you're being whipped, stripped, and drowned, you're going to lose your perception of time, because everything in the middle of everything else, you can't even recognize when the sun is coming out or when the moon's going down, because as far as your existence is concerned now, you're just rolling through minutes and minutes of some of the worst pain or psychological torture you've ever experienced. But it gets to a point where you don't even perceive it anymore. So it's like, I don't really spend too much time on whether or not a character is getting whipped. I'm more thinking about what's the character thinking about in this moment. Like, on top of their pain, what are they reflecting on, and what is the motivation of the person who's actually torturing them? To make it more direct, I have a character named Ash. She was she's an insurgent, let's say. She was captured at the border. She was actually hiding amongst the enemy, but they found her and they basically started interrogating her. Now, I didn't go into whether or not, like, I didn't go into the whole thing of her being kicked and punched all that much. Yeah, like, you can infer that based on how badly beaten she is, but when I actually go into her head, she's not thinking about the racist person who was kicking her and beating her. She's more thinking of, how am I going to get out of here? Her biases against her enemies are being reinforced, and finally, the motivations of the person torturing them. This is another angle that I like. Like, a lot of it, sometimes it turns into hired hands torturing the people because that's what they're there for. But I like going into the head of the person who's torturing them. Like, what are their bias? What's their bias? I mean, of course, when you have a nasty bias against someone, you're going to think some of the worst and quote unquote edgiest thoughts on the planet. You're gonna think that. But how do you portray it? Like, it's easy to throw in a term like a racial slur at a character when you know this character is a racist. You know that. But at the same time, what is informing the bias that person has? Because the nasty thing about racism is that when it's ingrained in someone, not only is it taught, but it's also informed by a lot. It's also informed a lot by their environment. So when you dig into the psychological profiles of both participants within the room, I'm not talking about switching POVs or anything. It makes a torture scene less of an edgy, or depending on who you ask, an erotic sort of deal, to a more introspective deal between the characters.
No, true. Because I think also not just like the not even just how you go about it in that sense. There's also just like, it also depends on like the tone of your story. So like some stories you may gloss over most of that and just go like to the aftermath or like I would that scene for me, because like getting into the mental space of the character's head, that seems like more my alley. But I think it just comes down to like knowing what you want out of the scene. So that's it, knowing your outcome, and then like knowing obviously torture it boils down to just, you're basically doing not inhuman, but you're doing really bad things to a person against their will. Like they're tied up or whatever, they're not unable to defend themselves, and you're doing these horrid things to them. And I think it's just getting that point across, however, whether you gloss over it or whether you go into the psychological part of it. And then it's just like the outcome of that, like the aftermath. I can imagine, which I think goes with a lot of other writing when they do, like, probably new to it or probably not really thinking about the repercussions of certain actions, because every action should have some sort of repercussion, especially the important one should have some repercussions. Like the repercussions, how the person going to come out of that on the other side? Did they escape? If they escaped, what mental turmoil did they have in their head, if any? Was they saved by someone? Like what's their mentality between before and after as well. I think that's,
Actually, I think like from listening and like just from listening to the both of you, my eyes kind of got open to this, because I have never really thought about doing torture scenes before. It was just never something that I had come across or had any desire to write up until now. But even just thinking about certain torture methods, I believe it's Chinese water torture, where they just sort of just
waterboarding.
no, not waterboarding, but the which one is the drip?
I know the one you mean. I don't know it by
Yeah,
name, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
when they just drop,
Yeah, upside down or something in the water.
wait, they just head down like one, not even upside down. It just water just drips down and hits you on the forehead, and you just never know what's going to happen. You just know it's going to happen, and people go insane from that. Like, and when I thought about it, and when I thought about the question and why it can be perceived as edgy, I think a lot of people. This sort of goes back. I think we had a discussion a while back. Remember when I told you guys kind of like my definition of how I view what is traumatic in a story?
Yeah,
Right.
I remember saying
Yeah, and I think a lot of people they don't or they haven't. It sounds so weird saying this because I don't want to sound like arrogant, but I don't think people have thought that far to what actually makes something traumatic, and so they go to the extremes. This person has to experience all sorts of terrible things, and I'm like, it's more, as you said, how did they internalize and interpret this experience? And
Exactly.
you don't even have to show the torture scene. If this person comes out and all of a sudden they're jittery every single place they go to, any single sound they hear, they jump. You already know that experience was bad. You don't have to see it.
Or hell, when you try to offer that person a cup of water after the whole thing, what's the first thing they do after? They slap it right out of your hand. They don't trust you. You're wearing the same uniform as the person who just tortured them. Yeah. Why on earth would they want to take anything from you at that point? And even then, even if you were going up to them with the kindness and motivations, they just spent, again, a full hour being tortured by someone within your same military, within your same rank. They don't have a reason to trust you at all, or anyone for that matter. Hell, I would argue it's not 100% on the uniform. You can't trust anyone within this foreign land that you've been taken into.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you know that water isn't poison? How do you know at that point?
Yeah, how do you know it's not another part of the torture? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Like that's the thing. Like I noticed this a lot with a lot of young writers too, and no knock against them, because you have to start somewhere. Because the basic idea of the physical pain that comes inherent with torture, but the problem of how it's written, like there seems to be this want to make it as detailed and as excruciating as possible, but you don't really have to do it though. That's where it comes down to. When we start to get into the excruciating detail of it, that's when it starts to become edgy. That's when it can become edgy. I mean, you can put excruciating details in there here and there, but there's a spillover point where it goes from, is this relevant to the story, to the point where it's like, are we just making this a... Yeah, exactly. Are we making this like a grim, dark affair more than anything else? Because at that point, we're not seeing the character. We're not seeing anyone else. All we just remember are the actions.
Just torture porn, basically, at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like a modern SpongeBob Squidward episode.
Oh god, are they that bad now? I've never really followed SpongeBob since I was young. Did they continue that bad?
Modern SpongeBob got pretty bad at one point.
Oh dear. Yeah. I think I was gonna add to that, like saying yeah, I think obviously there's a line to toe when you're talking, when you're like, you know, writing torture. But I think I like to think, maybe not for all stories, I don't like to put, it's just this or that. But I like to think a good torture is kind of like a monster in a show. The more you reveal of it, the less there is to fear, if that makes sense. If you leave more to the imagination, the more, I guess, it can be impactful in a way. But you got to give them a bit.
What you're saying.
You know what I mean? But I don't think that's just a thought that comes across my head. I'm not sure. I can't say it's like 100% applies to like all things, because obviously I think some you might have to show more detail. Maybe because showing some of the details kind of show some of their culture or certain things, or like, this guy's got his third little finger missing. This guy was tortured like me too, or something like that. You know what I mean? So you could have deals where you obviously have to go a bit grim for reasons. But I think just know your reasons and know the reason why you're showing them things, and hopefully with those and just being aware, you could toe the line without being too edgy, I suppose. But yeah.
I get. What's funny is it kind of comes like, for me at least, when I'm thinking about it, and it's kind of how I think about everything else, is do I need it? Like,
Yeah.
what does it do? As Kite said, do I need it? What does it do? If it doesn't do anything, then I don't need it. And I think that's sort of that sort of gets lost in the weeds of this is edgy, this is this, but I think it just comes to like this is unnecessary.
Exactly. Yeah. It's one of those moments of where you have to trim the fat, because trimming the fat is inherent to writing. It's inherent. It's something that you're going to have to do. Like, you can make the most detailed descriptions of a building or the engravings on a sword, but at the end of the day, what you're going to have is you're potentially going to have a scene that is going to slow your pacing down horribly. So you're going to have to trim the fat somewhere, and torture is just one of those things where trimming the fat is just necessary if you really want it to stick to people. Because oh man, there was this one thing I had to read while I was one of the managers for this this light novel page on Wattpad for a while, and one of the stories I had to read had some of the longest torture I'd ever read in anything. It was like a full chapter's worth of people getting torn to shreds, killed, maimed. It's like, okay, so that was just the first chapter, so what's next? Another chapter of like 3 more named characters getting killed. Like, okay, those guys were just introduced, but all right, maybe we'll get a different thing on the third. Guess what happens? It was literally, the first 4 chapters were literally just a slaughter and just people getting psychologically tortured in the process. I was just like, guys, just... If you see the character, look here, when it comes to torture, like if the reader also feels tortured, I see this as one of 2 things. If the reader also feels tortured in the process, that might help to get in your character, that might help you to get into the character's head. But here's the thing. Here's usually what happens. It becomes just as unenjoyable for you to want to keep going at that point.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I don't mind being...
but I mean, let's not go there.
Exactly. Like, I want to be in the character's head, but there's a limit to how much I can take. Because it's like, I'm not squeamish or anything, because I'm writing a war drama, so I have to go into some of the worst aspects of mankind. I have to do that. That comes inherent. But I don't need to show you how people are getting pushed into an oven for you to understand how horrible that is, do I? I don't have to do that, I hope.
Exactly. Yeah, I think definitely with when it comes to stuff like torture, just try to keep it lean as possible.
Yeah, for real. Big time. Because, Lord, nobody wants to read 3 full pages of how a golf swing is done.
Oh, no.
James, I'm making a James Bond reference. I'm so sorry. No one wants to read anything like that. I doubt anyone wants to read a long chapter of anyone being subjected to a wooden horse or getting candle wax poured on them. Like, I don't think anybody wants that. Oh, sorry, I forgot 50 Shades of Grey exists. What the hell am I talking about?
That seems to do pretty good, so.
It makes me question. I mean, I guess, Tuesday did it. Tuesday.
So I mean, it's the audience that's the audience that wanted it. So.
Yeah, exactly. Know your audience. That's it. Know your audience.
Yeah, know your audience. So, but in that case, it comes down to an audience thing. So, it's a little 50-50, but honestly, the best way for torture, in my opinion, just question what the motivations are, what it's supposed to lead to, and if anything, try not to lean into it too hard, because Lord knows when you lean into it too hard, more people are going to take away the torture more so than anything they were supposed to pick up from that scene, if there was anything to take up at all.
Yeah, definitely. Okay.
The other question was sex scenes about being cringed.
Ooh, I mean, it. I don't know. I like to almost feel like, I don't know, I have to might think of this a bit more, because me personally, I have no real plan to do like a full-on sex scene. I have moments where characters of have intimate, but I want to kind of keep it where they have their own privacy with that, and you get implications of it happened simply because it's important for the story I'm telling. So me personally, I'm not really like, I have no real plan to do it, so I've not really deeped it too much. But I think it's kind of like almost. I imagine it's almost kind of same with torture, where you don't want to get obsessed with the details too much. Know what you want. Know what you want to get, and stick with that. Keep it lean in that regard, and go from there.
Right. I haven't really had any outright sex scenes within my work, but I have implied when they have happened. Like when one of my characters walks into the Primarch's room, or not her room, her living room, and the room is pretty much empty. But earlier on, one of her main generals just walked out of the house. He was just getting his shirt set back up. Our first scene of fighting the Primarch, she's literally just kind of hunched over on her couch, like she looks completely wasted and smashed. But as soon as a character starts speaking to her, she just kind of lights up. Like there's some semblance of light and happiness in her eyes. It's like, oh no! And then I actually put one more detail that. Yep, I put a detail that her shirt is a little ruffled. That's how you know someone just got smashed.
Yeah,
someone just got smashed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But if I had to go full in and describing it, it kind of goes back to the torture subject of keeping it lean. But there are some aspects that I do feel needs to be played in on, because the way how I see sex between characters, it's not necessarily a physical connection. It is also an emotional and psychological connection.
Yeah.
So, talking about how the characters are bonding, not necessarily physically, but emotionally, that's what makes it as compelling as it is.
Yeah.
I mean, for 50 Shades of Grey, a lot of it, from what I read, was mostly just physical acts. And the physical acts by itself, that can be stimulating. But the chemistry and the passion between the two characters isn't something that needs to be established physically. It can also be established psychologically.
Yeah.
I also have a bit of a cheat sheet in the sense that my two lead characters, they can communicate with each other just by their thoughts alone. So this means that their thoughts are always intermingling. So when they're actually doing this sort of thing, which I've actually written about myself, it becomes less focused on what parts are smashing into each other and more about what they're saying to each other through their thoughts. Hell, you don't even need to hear somebody else's thoughts for you to know exactly what they're thinking. It really is a matter of looking at their eyes, looking at their expressions. It all comes down to all that. That's one of the things I miss when I read a lot of sex scenes written by people. It's like, I mean, you got the physical parts down and you got the dirty talk down, which can be pretty cringe, but that's another conversation. Which is another conversation in itself. But I want to feel the passion, my dude. And listen. I usually write sex scenes from a woman's perspective, so I'm already barking up the wrong tree, depending on who you ask. But I'm an emotional person when it comes to that stuff myself. So that's fun.
Yeah, I main thing it's like the emotional connection definitely, and kind of along with the torture. I was gonna say something else. I was gonna say what you definitely don't want to do. I don't know. I'll try to think of an exception, but I think off the top of my head, what you definitely don't want to do is start naming everything in medical terms.
Oh Jesus, no!
Oh,
he proceeded to write in the, and then after lifted her up, shoved it into Groves.
Oh
in
my
the
gosh,
most painful.
In the pooper.
Oh my gosh.
Those are the most painful. I read some of those, and of course, you have to start somewhere.
Yeah,
So
really
obviously,
do.
I didn't say anything. I kind of just was like, you may want to dial that back a little bit and really sort of explain.
Yeah, it's one of those moments where I will make an exception to my rule. I'll be like, that whole do's and don'ts thing. Yeah, about that, I may have to add a little bit of a caveat there, a little bit of an asterisk. Just a bit of an asterisk. Like, I think sex scenes are the only things that I make that strict of an exception for, because it's like, listen, if you want this to be hot and sexy, you better
or at least
not
intimate or something.
Exactly. You better not do this American porn dialogue thing, or I swear to God, man.
Oh no. God. Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Cool. Alright, cool. Is everyone?
I do think. Oh, I did want to sort of kind of just like tie that all in. What it sounded like to me is that like a lot of things, kind of get lost in the weeds of, as you said, this sounds edgy, this sounds cringe, and I think what it really is that people may not fully understand what's wrong with the scene.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes what those scenes are lacking, as Kite said, is what are we supposed to take from this emotionally and psychologically for the rest of the story?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
If it's just the physical, because we don't read or watch things for just the physical thing going on, because then we'll just take stick figures and just have them go through actions and that's it, and nobody really wants to see that. You want to see what's going on with these characters, how they interact with what's going on. In the end, we're following people. We're invested in. And I think that's usually what's missing from these scenes, is that they're missing the emotional and psychological along with the physical. And some people focus too much on the physical, leave the emotional, psychological, and then you kind of get things where it's like, okay, this is a bit excessive and almost unnecessary.
Yeah, it's like the thing is happening, but what does it mean? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's not getting into what happens with really, really bad abusive relationships within romance books. Like that's another conversation to itself.
Yeah.
That kind of deserves its own topic. But even those fail at getting what I'm getting across. Where you would think that maybe with how much backlash they get from critics and readers alike, that they probably have that basic connection down, but they don't. And that ironically makes them a hell of a lot worse. Not like it would make it much better if we got that connection established, because at the end of the day, it's still an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
But I argue that when it fails at getting that basic connection down, still, it is far less tolerable. It's still it's even worse.
Far less empathy, because not only do you not like the character, and not only can you not really get into the person, maybe the victim's head, if you're in the victim's head, for example, you're just like, why am I here then? I'm here, I'm watching people, go through this bad stuff, but I don't really care about what's going on because it's not really being portrayed in a way where I can kind of get into that headspace. So cool.
I always like these things because they help me better understand what I'm thinking. Like sometimes I'll hold positions, but I've never worked them through.
Yeah, same.
And
sometimes,
and then sometimes I'll be like, oh man, I want to help this person, but I don't even know what I'm gonna say. I just know that I think a certain way.
Yeah. I think doing these helped me like put thoughts into words and certain things, because usually I think like, okay, I understand like maybe this, or I'll think about that, but like it'll be just like until it's directly asked, I'll be like, I don't know, it doesn't like doing this helps me like kind of just put the things into words, and then there's stuff where it's like, oh, I never really thought about that like this before, and it kind of helps just discover more stuff. So it's great. It was good. Okay, I guess we can leave it there.
There's some other questions here that I'd love to talk about another date though.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, for sure. We got topics for a while.
Like knowing your genre, how to write info dump that doesn't waste the reader's time. Like that is a really good question, man.
Yeah.
That is a fantastic question.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Definitely.
I want to talk about it, but we got to wrap up soon. But let's keep that at the back of our heads for now, because that question is something that a lot of people like to avoid. But the info dump by itself isn't inherently bad. It isn't.
So, at worst or at most, it's a necessary evil sometimes. But you just gotta know. I don't know. I guess we're kind of touching on it now. I think most times it's like you gotta. Sometimes a general rule of thumb. I don't like to say that all the time because sometimes there's an exception to it. But the general rule of thumb is kind of like leave it late as possible.
Right, and if there's going to be an info dump at all, we have to make sure that it's just as compelling as anything else that the reader has seen so far. Like, if you want to discuss like how the rules of your magic system works, for example, an info dump isn't inherently a bad place to do it. It's better to gradually explain these things.
Yeah.
It's better to gradually explain it. But I feel one of the best examples of a sort of info dump is what happened in Avatar: The Last Airbender's first episode, where Sokka goes on a bender about water bending. I know it's water bending. It's important to our culture. It's like the guy just goes on a freaking tirade. And it's incredible.
Yeah.
It's like so much of the Water Tribe's culture was just told to you in a borderline info dump by a guy who's losing his goddamn mind because his sister is giving him crap. That is amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I think what makes that work there is because they've kind of fitted it into the characters and fitted it into the scene and into like a kind of like he's basically ranting. And it feels natural, but at the same time you're getting told this information. Yeah, I think another example off the top of my head I keep thinking back to, it's like in Hunter x Hunter. I remember this one scene where it's at the beginning of the exams, and I think who's arguing? I think it was Karapika and Leorio. They're arguing about certain stuff, and you're basically literally getting info dumped. But because they're ranting to each other about it between Gon about which one's right to do. I forgot exactly what it was. But because it's been set in like them basically arguing with each other, it doesn't come across as really info dumping. But you really think about it, you basically get all the information.
Exactly. The best way to do an info dump is to ensure the reader doesn't see it as an info dump coming in.
Yeah.
Because if they can look at it and oh my god, info dump, it's more like, whoa, that was kind of an info dump, but that was really interesting.
Yeah.
It actually feels like that's something the character would say. It's a matter of making sure that it's something the character would say in the moment. Of course, we're talking about when a character does it. When the narrator does it, on the other hand, that's where things get a little rockier.
Yeah.
But then it's just a matter of giving that information in a manner that's at least, what's the word for it, diegetic, I think. Kind of like the information is coming in the middle of something. Like, instead of just being told about it, you're seeing it happen.
Yeah, whilst it's happening, it's not like, okay, the character's about to go on a Ferris wheel. By the way, this world has 20 demons. It's like, no, you tell it maybe when the guy's like looking at, I don't know, cocoons of these weird things and they're demons. There's a demon. Okay, there are 20 demons. It's like, okay, cool. I mean, it's a bit more
like how in the Expanse, there's the ring. Like, if you fly into it at a certain speed and you don't slow down, it will actually kill you. You have to go at the ring at a certain speed, and you're not necessarily told about that outright. You're shown the process. So when the character eventually explains how it works, you've already seen this happen before. So it finally makes sense in the moment. In fact, there's even a moment where once you start to slow down, some things can actually get frozen in place. Like, someone can launch a rocket at you, but the rocket will actually get frozen due to the ring's makeup. Again, you're not told that, you are shown that, and then the characters explain how it works. That's... So when the info dump eventually comes, it eventually recontextualizes what you knew.
Yeah, it just kind of completes what you knew. Or sometimes it seems like it gets you curious about the thing because you've seen it doing some stuff like, interesting. Now you're getting more information about that thing, but you're kind of ready for it because you've seen some of what it does, and sometimes that can be makes you curious about the thing, I imagine, as well. But yeah, I guess we covered that. Guess we covered it anyway. That's fine. That's all good. Okay, I'm gonna end the recording though. But again, it's been a pleasure to talk to you guys, as always.
As always,
we should come with an intro and outro at some point. But anyways, we'll just anyways,
yeah, you need to.
Yeah, we'll work out. But yeah, good talk to you guys. So definitely try do this next week, if not a later week.
Sorry about that. I got yeeted. I had a blue screen of death just now.
Mine gets that every time.
Oh gosh. Yeah, no problem. But yeah, we'll probably hope to do this next week. If not, yeah, we'll take it from there. We'll work out there. But yeah, good talking to you guys though. Yeah, take care.
All right, same.